Almond. That is a weekly show for you, giving you the updates in Hong Kong. Um, as you can see or hear, that we're outdoor here again in Hong Kong, and I'm going to show you where I'm going in just a bit. Walking there. I'm actually in the neighborhood that I'm living in. So, but as you can tell from the title of this stream, today we're going to talk about COVID updates as well as a policy address in Hong Kong. Um, excuse me if I'm not looking into the camera because I'm also walking and crossing the roads, so that's why. So yeah, this week we're going to talk about COVID updates as well as policy address. So many of you may ask, what is a policy address? A policy address is basically like an annual report. Prepared by the chief executive, that is Carrie Lam. Hi, Pablo. Thank you so much for joining. Must be evening in the U.S. on your side, right? So, good evening to you. Okay, so go back to policy address. So basically, policy address is like an annual report produced by our chief executive, outlining the policies that she has for the upcoming year. So maybe I shouldn't say report. It's more like a budget, but not money, but for policies. So it's like a plan that the government has for the coming year. So that is what a policy address is about. We're going to get into some details of policy address in a bit, but I want to give you guys a little bit of a COVID update first. So it's actually getting quite windy and cold in Hong Kong right now. And of course, that comes with a surge of winter flu season. So hopefully it will not get worse because the pandemic here, we are actually hitting the fourth wave in Hong Kong. We are seeing like double-digit cases every day. And just a couple, I think like yesterday or 2 days ago, it was the highest records again since August. So our outbreak has eased a little bit back in summertime, sort of. And then now it is getting worse again. So let me see if this is opened. So I'm actually here to show you, I'm just going to show you some signs. So I'm actually here in this outpatient clinic here in Sai Ho, which is where I live, the neighborhood I'm living in. It's like a general outpatient clinic in Hong Kong. So they have some, it's basically like a collection and a pickup and a drop-off locations for sample bottles for COVID-19 virus tests. So basically what the government is doing here, because especially with us hitting the fourth wave, we are enhancing testing as well as contact tracing in the community. So there have been a lot of calls for mass testing, citywide mass testing, but unfortunately our government says that it's not quite feasible to make it mandatory because that would mean that we need to put the whole city on lockdown for at least a few weeks if we're to test everybody and make it mandatory. It's probably still closed right now, but so basically, yeah, it's probably still, still closed. But basically, what people would do here is that it looks quite cool. If I could show you the video, the visuals. But basically what people do here is that there is a sort of like a vending machine in the clinic, and it's almost just like buying a soda, and you can just and it's for free. You can just like tap your Octopus card, which is a sort of like a metro card in Hong Kong. You just need to collect a sample bottle, and then it will from the vending machine, and it would drop you off a pack, and just take it, give your sample, your saliva sample, and return it the other day or within probably 2 or 3 days. Um, and back to the location, just drop it off, and there you go. And you'll hear your results in, whether it's positive or negative, in probably 2 or 3 days as well. Um, so that is, we're actually seeing people here, so maybe they're also queuing for um, the the vending machine sample bottles, but maybe not because it's Sunday here in Hong Kong, so it's public holiday. The clinic might be closed, so that's why. But I just want to show you guys, like, we do have sort of like this general outpatient clinics. It's run by Hong Kong's hospital authority, so it's sort of like a public healthcare facilities that we have in Hong Kong. And but speaking of some COVID-19 measures, we do have some measures that have raised quite a few eyebrows in Hong Kong recently. Is that because of the fourth wave, and the government is trying to like encourage people to do more testing, and if you're a close contact of infected people, then you should come forward and tell the authorities that I've come in contact with this infected COVID-19 patients. So they have this reporting mechanism. And in order to encourage more people to get tested, the government actually proposed this one-off $5,000 grant. $5,000, that's probably a couple $100 in USD, for those who get infected by COVID-19. So the aim is to, according to the government, the aim is to help those, especially those low-income families, low-income group. And because of the pandemic, we have a lot of industries have been hit hard by the pandemic, right? And so especially, for example, the catering industry, we have like mandatory closure time for restaurants. So, and a lot of people don't eat out right now. So those restaurants have been hit really hard, and they have like little business. And so many of them, many low-income group people in Hong Kong, they're really worried that, if they test positive, that would force them out of work for at least a couple of weeks, for treatment and quarantine and whatnot, right? So the government said, in order to encourage those people to also get tested, and not to avoid, getting a positive result and having to worry about not able to go into work because those people can't afford not going to work. They're giving out this $5,000 grant to those infected. Now, here's the eyebrows raising part. Some critics said, if those critics said you're basically giving people rewards for getting infected, because it's also like not what we call like non-mean test. So you don't have to provide, say I am from a low-income family group, and to get this grant, basically whoever you are, even you're like super rich, if you get infected, according to what the government plans right now, you can still get that $5,000 subsidy. Of course, the government said that we don't want to put any like restraint on it, and because we do want to help more people, provide more financial support for more people, and that's why they're not setting any like mean test restrictions there. But there are of course worries that it's going to be abused, and to be very honest, the people that I've talked to, during this pandemic, a lot of people have been affected, like their living, their work. So even just a little bit of money would help. Even though the government said that, well, we hope people would be, self-disciplined and, won't abuse the service. So if you're rich, if you're able to support yourself, don't get this subsidy. But honestly, during this difficult time, like I said, a little bit money still help, um, no matter you're rich or poor. So that's one of so-called loophole by some critics. Um, and so yeah, that's the COVID update. I'm just gonna show you guys one more time the clinic. We have some people are waiting outside, but not sure if they're waiting for the sample bottles collection. But here is it. Here it is. This is the outpatient clinic. I saw some questions. Can you reuse the kind of mask I'm wearing? No, unfortunately, I cannot. This is just a disposable surgical mask. That is a very good point that you have raised. We have used a lot of surgical masks, and also, just protective gears, including, gloves, plastic gloves, and some people use like face shields to protect them when they go out. It is it's not only a health crisis, it's also a environmental crisis that we're dealing with, especially when this pandemic is coming to an end. Hopefully, it will be soon. We don't know where that will be, but hopefully, it will be soon. Um, so another thing that I want to give you update this week is the policy address I've mentioned at the very beginning of our stream. So this policy address, I'm not going to go into the nitty-bitty details. Don't want to bore you guys. A lot of this measures included in this policy address is, like I said, sort of like a government's vision of what this coming year they'll be like, what exactly the policies will be they will be implementing in the coming year. Now, everybody knows that Hong Kong is a really, really small place, really, really small, and we have a scarce land supply. We don't have a lot of, Hong Kong's landscape is actually very hilly, so we don't have a lot of flat land that we can develop to build houses on. And this has been a problem for the government as well as Hong Kong people for many, many years. And so land supply and housing supply, and other fun fact, everybody would probably know is Hong Kong is actually one of the most expensive cities to live in the whole world. So we have very, very high property price. We have the rents, and not only we're talking about buying a property, owning a property is extremely difficult in Hong Kong, especially for young people right now, because we don't make much, but the price tag is just really not reachable, is unattainable sometimes without help with, for example, your parents. And rental is also very expensive. So, like I said, Hong Kong is one of the most expensive cities to live in the world. That's something we know. So land supply, housing supply is one of the very big concerns and major policies in Hong Kong. And this year, we have this, the chief executive, Carrie Lam, she has put a lot of focus on hoping to solve the land supply and housing supply issue. And one very ambitious project that I saw comments sounds like America. Well, I think yes, in terms of like affordable housing, yes, that is absolutely true, especially in places like New York. It's really expensive. So yes, I don't deny that it is one of the biggest problems in so many cities in the world, especially cosmopolitan, city. So one of the very ambitious land projects that I'm talking about, proposed by the government, is called Lantau Tomorrow Vision. So Lantau is one of the sort of like outlying, well, not outlying really, but it's one of the, I guess you can call it outlying island in Hong Kong. And so in a nutshell, the government plan is they want to build this large-scale reclamation project to create this man-made island in the middle of our waters. It's a very big thousands acre of land that they're hoping to create. And this project cost 6 billion Hong Kong dollars. So that's around 780 million US dollars. It's a very, very expensive project. It's a multi-billion dollar project, well, multi-billion in Hong Kong dollars. And a lot of environmentalists have come out and oppose this project because it's going to have detrimental effect on Hong Kong's environment and also the ecosystem in those waters. So this is a very controversial project in Hong Kong that the government is trying to push through. And with the Legislative Council that we have currently, last week I brought you guys to Legislative Council, the outside of the Legislative Council, rather. And without the opposition in the in LegCo, it's probably going to be very easy for the government to pass that bill. And right now, our LegCo is actually debating this sort of like pre-study project for this Land Out Tomorrow vision, this large-scale reclamation project. So before they do it, they have to conduct studies. They have to conduct, this so-called feasibility studies to actually find out whether building this man-made island is actually practical and feasible, and if doable, then how are they going to do it to minimize, environmental costs and everything. Only this study alone cost Hong Kongers $5 million, so $500,000 Hong Kong dollars. It's a very costly and expensive project, and it's really controversial, like I said, because especially without the opposition parties in the legislature, people are worried that there wouldn't be as much as a constructive debate and scrutiny in the legislature to really vet that bill, no matter we're talking about the feasibility study or the actual reclamation project. So people are really worried that the government is just going to push through ahead, barge in and do this project as they wish, despite there have been a lot of oppositions from the public as well as green groups. Of course, like I said, reclamation, it's always not so popular among green groups. We all know that. So that's one of the very controversial land supply projects that we have in the policy address. And another, like I said, I'm gonna spare you guys with the nitty-bitty details about a lot of local policies, very local policies. But one thing I think it's quite interesting to highlight is that the policy address actually put a lot of emphasis on integrating Hong Kong with the mainland economy. Earlier a couple of months earlier, President Xi Jinping actually talked about because of the trade row with the U.S. and then we have the pandemic hitting, the whole global economy has to change basically, and they are China is shifting to this so-called dual circulation, and they're focusing a lot on domestic sales, domestic retail, domestic economy. So of course, Hong Kong is also part of that dual circulation, and that's why in her policy address, Chief Executive Carrie Lam has put a lot of emphasis on integrating Hong Kong into the mainland market, into the mainland economy. And one of those initiatives would, of course, be taking up a more active role in the Greater Bay Area and tapping into the Greater Bay Area, which is a nearby region in Hong Kong, including Shenzhen, Guangdong Province, Shanghai, and so on and so forth. So this is one way that the government has been encouraging Hong Kong businesses and also young people to tap into the mainland market. It has a lot of potential, and so she has put a lot of emphasis in that on that issue in her policy address. And just give you guys a little bit example. The Hong Kong government has actually have encouraged a long time encouraged Hong Kong young people to go develop in on the mainland, go find a job, work on the mainland, because there are a lot of job opportunities there. And so in this policy address, there were actually schemes or proposals, rather, I should say, that the government would be subsidizing some firms on the mainland to hire Hong Kong young people or give young people some sort of a grant or subsidy to start their own company on the mainland. So this is one way that the Hong Kong government is trying to use to really encourage young people to go up north and start their career out there instead of staying in Hong Kong and get a job in Hong Kong and whatnot. So and they're also providing subsidies to small and medium businesses to for example move their factories to up north, to move their headquarters because rents there is cheaper, and like I said, dual circulation market or economy style. And so this is one of the big thing in the policy address that is Carrie Lam has emphasized a lot on um, really integrating with the mainland market, the mainland economy, uh, describing it as a huge opportunity for Hong Kong business and also young people to tap into. I saw some comments. Hamstrand said, "Is it possible to rent or own houseboats?" Um, that is a good question. I would say in Hong Kong, you can probably there are people who live in boats, um, but I don't think you can consider it as houseboats because, I mean, my understanding of houseboats is that it's really like a house rather than living on a boat, or living on a yacht, right? So it's I would assume that houseboats is more um, a more established version, more like a house than a boat. It's just that it's sort of like a floating house, right? In Hong Kong, there are people who live in boats, who live in yachts, but they are. I wouldn't call it houseboats, because it's really them living on boats rather than a sort of a house structure, rather. But there are people. This is one of the options, and I've also come across people or stories, interviews that they said it's actually more affordable to live on a boat. You spend less money to buy a boat, and it's cheaper to maintain, sort of, and yeah, so and it's freer. It's like a mobile home, right? So you can go wherever you want. Well, not really wherever you want because there are restrictions, but yes, this is an option. Um, yes, so I mean that is definitely one of the options in Hong Kong. But I guess it's quite a thing in Asian is stability. So people do like to have their own, like, really a house, a flat that they own and they can live in. So still, this houseboat or floating caravan, like you said, it's still not so popular or famous or common in Hong Kong. But definitely, I mean, I absolutely agree that is one of the options. And if you ask me, I would spend my money on a yacht rather than a house because it's really, it, it's just, I don't know, it's just, I think I would spend my money in that way better. I think that's more reasonable and more worthwhile, I would say. So, yeah. So yeah, this is this week's update. Seeing this question from Brad: do you think Beijing is trying to encourage economic ties with the mainland in order to normalize Beijing's control of Hong Kong? Um, And that is actually one very good point that you've raised, Brad. This is definitely one of, especially opposition activists and also critics' worries, is that, and it's actually quite a usual tactic, I would say, for Beijing to, say that you really need to rely on us um, instead of the other way around, because Hong Kong has been known as the international finance hub. Um, and a lot of countries, a lot of businesses, they do business with Hong Kong, or rather, um, using Hong Kong as a connecting point to go into the mainland market. So in the past, it has always been, Hong Kong contributing to the mainland economy, to the mainland economic development. But right now, um, yes, it is true that the Chinese government is trying to, really reshape that conversation, and also kind of like reshape the whole dynamic. Is that we no longer need Hong Kong, the mainland no longer needs Hong Kong. Like for sure, Hong Kong still has its own advantage, its own status as a financial hub, an international financial hub, a freer system, freer financial system. Um, but it's also, like I said, reshaping that conversation dynamic by saying that, China is actually a bigger market right now to tap into, and Hong Kong would actually benefit off from China's development. Um, and we have heard that rhetoric, over and over again, is that, for example, Chinese tourists is really what holding our tourism industry up, because they're coming here, on so many holidays, and they can also, I mean, they not only come in during the long holidays, for example, Christmas, they also come to Hong Kong, say, like on the weekends, just for like a short, weekend trip, and they would spend a lot of money buying, accessories, electronic appliances, jewelries. That would really boost Hong Kong's tourism industry. But if you look into the figures, Chinese tourists actually don't take up a lot of percentage of Hong Kong's tourism industry. So we have heard that rhetoric going on for quite some time, for years actually, that, China and Chinese tourists and Chinese business is quite a backbone of Hong Kong's economy. Um, I wouldn't say it's entirely false. They do contribute to a certain extent to our economy, but I wouldn't say that it's really like Hong Kong is relying on mainland alone, and we couldn't survive without Chinese tourists or business input in Hong Kong's system. So to answer your question in short, it could be a possible. This idea has been floated around, especially among like opposition camps and opposition activists, saying that Beijing is just trying to warm up to Hong Kong by saying that providing economic benefits and whatnot. Actually, very good point. Carrie Lam, Chief Executive Carrie Lam, actually um, delayed her policy address this year, trying to include more what she called cross-border economic or financial measures that she has proposed to the central government to improve Hong Kong's economy, and also because she's saying that with the global economy being hit, um, it's it's just better off if Hong Kong could rely on a more stable and a rather recovered economy, meaning China, because mainland China is, controlling the outbreak quite well, or a lot better than other parts of the world. So this is one of the focus and highlights that she is trying to portray in the policy address, is that we really need to tap into the mainland market for, if we want to recover our economy, if we want to turn things around and things like that. So this has been the narrative in her policy address, and also the narrative of a lot of, pro-Beijing politicians and Beijing government, Beijing officials saying that. So yes, that is definitely uh, one of the narratives the Chinese government could be trying to paint. Definitely. So yes, really great questions there, and also I really enjoy showing you guys the neighborhood. Unfortunately, the clinic was not open, so that is an unfortunate thing. But this is this week's In a Nutshell with Almond, the weekly show that gives you the weekly update on Hong Kong's happenings. So thank you so much for joining, and let me know, DM me or follow me on social media. Subscribe me on Half for sure, and follow me on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, um, and DM me or just comment on the stream below. Telling me what kind of topics that you want me to cover, and I'll see you next week. So thank you so much for joining. Bye.